Picture this. You're scrolling through social media when suddenly you see a photo that makes you do a double take. The woman in the picture looks nothing like the Marie Osmond you remember from your childhood. Her face appears decades younger, almost like she's discovered the fountain of youth. But here's the thing that's got everyone talking. Is this really the same person who sang Paper Roses all those years ago? The internet has been buzzing with one burning question. What happened to Marie Osmond's face? Some people are calling her transformation miraculous. Others are whispering that she's gone too far. And a few are even suggesting she looks like a completely different person. But the real story behind Marie's changing appearance is far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Today, we're going to dive deep into the truth about Marie Osmond's transformation. We'll explore the decades of pressure, pain, and public scrutiny that led to this moment. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why her story isn't just about cosmetic procedures. It's about a woman who has been fighting battles with her appearance since she was just a little girl. Marie Osmond's story begins long before anyone ever heard her sing. Born in 1959 in Utah, she was the only daughter in a family of 9 children. But her childhood was nothing like what you might expect for a future star. Her parents were already struggling to raise 2 deaf sons, and doctors had warned them not to have more children. When Marie was born with perfect hearing, her parents saw it as a sign from God. From the moment she could walk, Marie's life was structured like a military operation. Her father ran their home with strict rules and endless rehearsals. While other 3-year-olds were playing with toys, Marie was learning Swedish songs for European tours. There was no time for a normal childhood. Everything revolved around performing. The family was also drowning in debt, having lost over $25,000 on failed businesses. That's like losing $200,000 today. When Marie was just 4 years old, she appeared on the Andy Williams Show. Most people thought it was adorable, but behind the scenes, this was serious business. Little Marie was working 18-hour days, memorizing scripts she couldn't even read, and already facing comments about her weight. At 4 years old, producers were already critiquing her appearance. This was the beginning of a lifelong struggle that would follow her for decades. Can you imagine being 4 years old and having adults tell you that you need to lose weight? That's exactly what happened to Marie. She wasn't performing because she loved it. She was performing because her family needed the money to survive. The pressure on such a young child was enormous, and it planted seeds that would grow into much bigger problems later on. By the time Marie was 10, she was handling money after shows and tracking ticket sales with her mother. She had adult responsibilities before most kids were allowed to cross the street alone. When the Osmonds hit it big in 1971 with One Bad Apple, they suddenly had money, but Marie often felt left out of her brother's success. She was just seen as a girl in a family of talented boys. Everything changed for Marie in 1973 when she recorded Paper Roses. She was just 14 years old when the song became a massive hit, reaching #1 on the country charts. But success came with a terrible price. Her record label wanted her to act older than she was, choosing songs that sounded mature and sophisticated. Even at 14, Marie was being pulled away from her authentic voice and pushed into an image that wasn't really her. The real tragedy struck in 1974. Marie had been performing nonstop when her voice began to fail. Doctors were shocked to find that her vocal cords showed damage normally seen in adults after years of abuse. She was only 15 years old. The footage from that time is heartbreaking. You can see her barely able to sing, trying not to cry on stage. She was exhausted, but the machine around her kept moving because she was making millions for the family business. By 1975, Marie was doing over 200 shows a year. That kind of schedule would be brutal for a seasoned adult performer, but for a teenager, it was almost unbearable. She was flying between countries, recording albums, doing television shows, and still trying to be a normal girl. But there was nothing normal about her life. Child labor laws and entertainment barely existed back then, so no one stepped in to protect her. In 1976, something unprecedented happened in television history. Marie and her brother Donnie were offered their own variety show. She was just 16 years old when Donnie and Marie premiered, making them the youngest hosts in TV history. Nearly 14 million people watched that first episode, and week after week, they kept tuning in to see the teenage siblings sing and dance. But behind all that glitter and those famous balloon drops was something much darker. While millions of viewers saw a cheerful teenager, Marie was working 18-hour days with barely any sleep. She still had to study with a tutor and do chores when she got home. The pressure was crushing her, but the worst was yet to come. Here's where the story gets really heartbreaking. Producers told Marie she was too fat. Think about that for a moment. She weighed only 103 pounds and was 5 feet 5 inches tall, but they told her to lose 10 more pounds or they would cancel the show. Marie started starving herself. Her weight dropped to just 93 pounds. She could barely stay awake during tapings. But it gets worse. Some people actually dragged her into parking lots and called her horrible names, including Fat Pig. Can you imagine? A teenage girl, already underweight, being called fat by the very people who were supposed to be taking care of her career. This kind of abuse would damage anyone, but for a vulnerable teenager, it was devastating. The damage from this treatment stayed with Marie for decades. She developed a pattern of binge eating, followed by days of fasting. Her metabolism never recovered from extreme dieting. She couldn't look in mirrors without feeling horror about her appearance. This wasn't vanity. This was trauma from years of having her body criticized and controlled by others. When the show moved to Utah in 1977, Marie tried to modernize it with disco-themed performances, but some fans didn't like the changes. She would try to find her own voice in a world that kept telling her what to do. In 1978, she collapsed on set from dehydration and exhaustion. Her team tried to hide this from the media because they couldn't risk damaging the show's clean image. The show was eventually canceled in 1979, but for Marie, this wasn't just a career setback. The years of being judged, starved, and pushed to her limits had done real psychological damage. She had learned to see her body as something that needed to be controlled, criticized, and constantly improved. This mindset would follow her for the rest of her life. Marie tried acting in Broadway, but critics were harsh. When she played Maria in The Sound of Music in 1982, reviewers tore her apart. The show ended early, and she had to step away from the spotlight just to heal. It wasn't until 1994 that she returned to the role and finally received some praise. These experiences taught her that public opinion could be brutal and unpredictable. In 1985, Marie made a comeback in country music with There's No Stopping Your Heart. The album was hugely successful and she hit the road, performing over 300 shows a year. She would perform anywhere, even scraping mud off her shoes after walking through cow fields to get to venues. But this time, the hard work paid off, and it felt like a new beginning. Around the same time, Marie discovered something that would change her life: business. She started designing and selling porcelain dolls on QVC, and it became a massive success. One doll, based on her own mother, sold 3 million units in just 15 minutes. Over time, this business empire earned her more than $50 million. People said she was just cashing in on her image, but Marie proved she had real business intelligence. The late 1990s brought Marie to Las Vegas, but it wasn't until 2008 that magic happened again. She and Donnie launched a residency at the Flamingo Hotel that was supposed to be temporary, but ended up running for 11 years. They performed 1,230 shows by the time it ended in 2019, making it the longest-running singing duo act in Vegas history. At their peak, they were each earning over $1 million a year. But Marie's personal life was filled with struggles that the public rarely saw. In 2001, she did something incredibly brave by releasing a book called Behind the Smile about her battle with postpartum depression. After giving birth to her 7th child, she fell into such a dark place that she drove off and disappeared for 3 days, leaving her children behind. Her husband had to track her down to a motel where she was hiding, scared and broken. The most devastating moment of Marie's life came in 2010 when her 18-year-old adopted son Michael died by suicide. He had been struggling with depression, especially after Marie's divorce, and felt completely alone. Just days before his death, he told Marie, "I have no friends." Those words haunted her because she understood that feeling of isolation all too well. In a surprising turn of events, Marie remarried her first husband, Stephen Craig, in 2011, exactly 29 years after their first wedding. She found her original wedding dress from 1982 just 5 days before the ceremony, hidden in a box in her garage. She chose May 4th as her wedding date because it was both her mother's birthday and her late son Michael's birthday, wanting them both to be there in spirit. Throughout her life, Marie faced criticism not just about her appearance, but also about her personal choices. When she supported her gay daughter Jessica's marriage in 2009, many conservative fans were angry. People shamed her and said she was going against her faith, but Marie stood firm, saying civil rights should be for everyone. Marie also revealed in her book that she had been sexually abused as a teenager in the 1970s by someone involved in her career. The trauma from this experience affected how she saw herself and relationships for years. She said it was so devastating that it made her question her own identity and contributed to her lifelong struggles with body image. Her body also suffered from decades of performing. Years of dancing on stage had damaged her knees badly. During her Las Vegas shows, she once fell and chipped off a piece of her kneecap. In 2015, she had multiple knee surgeries, but she didn't talk much about it. She just kept performing because there was so much pressure to always appear strong and perfect. Now, let's talk about what's been making headlines recently. In March 2024, Marie appeared on a podcast with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson. Instead of focusing on the conversation, people became obsessed with her appearance. At 64 years old, many said she looked like a completely different person. Some accused her of going too far with plastic surgery. Side-by-side photos from the 1970s and 2024 went viral across the internet. The comments were brutal. People called her an imposter and flooded her social media pages with hurtful remarks. The criticism was so intense that it overshadowed everything else about her life and career. In 2025, Marie finally addressed the speculation directly. She admitted to having Botox treatments, laser procedures, and breast reduction surgery for back pain, but she denied having major surgeries like a facelift. Even so, plastic surgery experts who looked at her photos pointed out clear changes in her jawline and neck area that suggested more extensive work had been done. The pressure to look young had completely taken over the conversation about Marie. People seemed to forget her incredible career, her business success, her philanthropy, and her personal struggles. Everything was reduced to speculation about her face. For someone who had been dealing with appearance-related criticism since she was 4 years old, this must have been particularly painful. By April 2025, Marie had reached her breaking point. She announced on Instagram that she was stepping away from social media to focus on her family. She had already been offline for 9 months before making this announcement. She said the constant criticism about her looks and her past had worn her down completely. At 65 years old, Marie finally decided to choose peace over public opinion. She said she had always tried to listen to her heart, and now her heart was telling her to unplug from the digital world and focus on the people who truly mattered to her. After decades of loss, pain, and judgment, she was finally choosing to protect herself. But here's what we need to understand about Marie's transformation. This isn't just a story about plastic surgery or aging in Hollywood. This is the story of a woman who's been fighting battles with her appearance and self-worth since she was a young child. From the moment she stepped onto that stage at 4 years old, people have been commenting on how she looks, what she weighs, and whether she measures up to some impossible standard. Think about it. Maria spent over 60 years in the public eye. She's been criticized for being too fat when she was underweight, too old when she was young, and now too artificial when she's trying to age gracefully. She's faced comment about her body, her face, her voice, her choices, and her family. Very few people could handle that kind of constant scrutiny without it affecting them deeply. The truth about Marie's transformation isn't shocking because of what she may or may not have done to her face. It's shocking because it represents the culmination of a lifetime of pressure to be perfect. Every procedure, every treatment, every change she's made has likely been influenced by decades of having her appearance picked apart by strangers. We live in a world where women, especially those in the public eye, face impossible choices about aging. If they age naturally, they're criticized for looking old. If they try to maintain their appearance, they're criticized for looking fake. There's literally no way to win, and Marie has been dealing with this impossible standard longer than most. What makes Marie's story even more heartbreaking is that behind all the speculation about her face, there's a woman who has achieved incredible things. She's built a multi-million-dollar business empire. She's helped normalize conversations about postpartum depression. She supported LGBTQ+ rights when it wasn't popular in her community. She's raised 8 children and survived unimaginable loss. Marie Osmond is not just a face that people can critique on social media. She's a human being who has experienced more pain and triumph than most of us can imagine. She's someone who was forced to grow up too fast, who was criticized and controlled from childhood, who has battled depression and loss, and who has still managed to create a lasting legacy in entertainment and business. The conversation about her appearance says more about our society than it does about Marie herself. We become so obsessed with how people look that we forget to see who they really are. We reduce complex human beings to before and after photos and speculation about procedures. Perhaps the most important lesson from Marie's story is that transformation isn't just about the physical changes we can see. Marie has been transforming her entire life, from a scared little girl forced to perform, to a successful businesswoman who built her own empire, from someone who struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts, to someone who wrote books and spoke openly to help others going through similar struggles. Her decision to step away from social media in 2025 represents perhaps her most important transformation yet, the choice to prioritize her own well-being over public opinion. After spending decades trying to please everyone else, she's finally choosing to please herself. Marie Osmond's transformation story is ultimately about resilience, survival, and the courage to keep reinventing yourself despite constant criticism. It's about a woman who refused to let childhood trauma, public scrutiny, and personal loss define her completely. Yes, her face may look different now, but her spirit and determination remain as strong as ever. As we wrap up this deep dive into Marie Osmond's incredible and complex story, remember that behind every transformation, every change, and every choice, there's a human being with feelings, struggles, and dreams. Marie's journey reminds us to be kinder in our judgments and more understanding of the pressures that public figures face every single day. Her story is far from over. Even at 65, Marie continues to evolve, to make choices for herself, and to prioritize what truly matters. Whether you remember her as a little girl singing Paper Roses, the teenager hosting a variety show with her brother, or the businesswoman building an empire, one thing is certain: Marie Osmond has always been a survivor. What did you think about Marie Osmond's incredible journey? Were you surprised by some of the details about her childhood and the pressure she faced? Do you think the criticism about her appearance has been fair? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video opened your eyes to a different side of Marie's story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might find it interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth stories about your favorite celebrities, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.